Hello, my name is Sylvia Rodriguez, the San Francisco International Arts Festival newsletter editor. For this month's issue, I interviewed Bill Martinez, the festival's attorney in charge of securing international artist visas. I asked Bill what changes we might expect in the rules for processing visas in light of the general election results and policies of the incoming Biden administration. Here are some excerpts from our conversation. So, my first question is, what is the current state of affairs in regards to processing non-immigrant work visas for artists following the Trump administration and the change of mission for the USCIS?
When we talk about immigration changes and things that need to be addressed, when we talk about visas, you have family visas, you have work visas as artists. So we're focusing on the artist part.
Yeah.
In both cases, the pandemic has dramatically impacted who can come in. And that has nothing so much to do with politics as it does, unless you include COVID-19 restrictions as being political. And we can't say that necessarily. COVID still calls the shots in a lot of ways. All of these consulates are, I think it's 3/4 of the State Department's embassies and consulates are at least partially closed. And that means that they don't have as many staff people to analyze and approve visas, even for the most well-known artist who's been here before. There are processes, and we'll get to that in a little bit, of ways to, somehow come to terms with that.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, that is really heavy. Many of the embassies and consulates remain closed because, or at least severely hampered in processing visas after their interviews. So I want to give them kudos for approving most of the petitions that I've had since March, when they started opening doors. In fact, all of them have been approved. New era, we have the Department of Homeland Security headed by Alejandro Mayorkas, Cuban American guy with a much more progressive outlook. Well, he's still daunted by and hurt by the incredible backlog of visa applications, both for artists as well as families.
So, speaking of COVID and the new administration, what can the Biden administration do to reverse some of the changes in these upcoming years?
We want a long-term, just streamline things. Like I say, all of it, streamline it, make it more reasonable, flexible, and don't ask for crazy extra questions. The one thing they can do is they can streamline the process of, especially for those artists who have previously been approved for the same type of visa. If they were, in theory, they have something called an interview waiver. So that if you got, say, a P3 culturally unique visa and you're traveling from Peru, let's say, and you're applying this time, or you have another approval from the I-129 for a new P3 visa, take that notice over to the U.S. consulate in Peru, in Lima, Peru. You ought to be able to say, okay, well, you were already interviewed here last year. We already issued a visa last year. Everything's the same. You have a credible itinerary. You have the contracts. Letter of invitation is clearly credible. Because of COVID, we're not going to have people do your interview. Just submit the application for this, fill out this form they call DS 160, the Department of State Form 160, and you'll get we'll process your visa request without you having to come in. And one real problem with the USCIS, with these forms we fill out, is something called an I-129 petition. We would submit a real solid case, a petition for somebody who's been here a million times. Shouldn't be an issue. Well, all of a sudden we get this, what they call an RFE, request for evidence. And they ask the person who's reviewing the file, the adjudicator, asks sometimes for some really off the wall extra documentation that you would think it doesn't make sense. Got to have some flexibility, and that's something I would think that by some presidential decision, mandate, that they could say, you know what, let's be a little more flexible about this. And so there are some steps being made to encourage more flexibility within the process.
So now that we discussed what the administration can do, What are some long-term strategies that are being envisioned by the arts and entertainment industry and the legal teams that represent them?
There is a network of advocates led by an organization in New York called Tamizdat,
Mhm,
and this guy Matt Covey and his law firm. They're sort of taking a lead role in advocating something that has been started back, I guess, around April or May of last year,
mhm.
where congressional subcommittees were meeting with some of the arts presenters, excuse me, to urge some flexibility, problem solve. How can we save our gigs? One, and this is something I was pushing before they created this as well. I guess we were all on the same page, is to create some sort of flexibility and accommodation
Mhm.
for folks like Andrew Wood and the San Francisco International Arts Festival, which already had these several approvals but couldn't act on them.
Yeah.
And so, is there a way to extend or change the validity dates from 2020 to 2021 without having to spend all that extra money, still having to prove your case that you have a new uh, um, itinerary, you have new contracts, and you have a statement asserting that everything else is the same. Just please just change the dates. Then you try to get an appointment, get a new validity dates for the approval notice, take that over to your consular office in your country and get your interview done. But anyway, it would streamline and make more flexible the validity dates. And that's something that's still pending that Tamizdat had come up with. But it's also something that I had mentioned to them as well last year when they were meeting with congressional folks. And
It can be very challenging to understand what's going on as a small petitioner. So, what advice would you give to the small petitioners currently planning to bring international artists as non-immigrant workers to the United States in the short term?
the
Yeah.
way to deal with that is to be sure that you've done your homework in preparing the I-129 petition. That means you have a very clear letter of invitation that includes an itinerary, which is credible, not a bunch of made up stuff.
Yeah.
And not only is it not made up on your itinerary, but you can back it up with contracts signed by everybody. Letter of invitation, itinerary, contracts. Make
So what role can our elected representative or just members of the public in general help in assisting anything that we've talked
I
about?
mean,
Like,
they can contact their Congress people and all that, but really at a basic gut level, for right now, please, please, please support artists that are doing live streaming because they got to pay the rent. And now that we're starting to open up the doors a little bit, please attend the event, support your artists and the presenters who have lost so much money during these times. Of course, if they have contacts with their politicians in their area, write them a letter, shoot them a letter, give them a call. But um, love your artists and your arts presenters. They're putting out a lot to keep us going spiritually and morally and otherwise.
all right. Well, thank you so much for this interview. I really appreciate it. Did you have any last words?
No, no. Well, I could give you the one thing, the mantra that everybody says nowadays. It was coined by so Juan Carlos, I think it's Carlos Burciaga in Stanford. La cultura cura, culture cures. It was Burciaga who said that and made that phrase that sticks to a lot of us, and it still rings true. Culture cures. Let's keep curing each other.
Thank you.